Hello everyone, my name is Mark Philipp. I'm a partner and managing director with Kearney's Global Health Practice. Today, I would like to welcome you to our new episode of the Biopharma R&D Practitioners' Voices, an interview series with conversations from industry practitioners in pharma, drug discovery and development that help us to inform and talk about strategy and transformation in drug discovery and development. Today, I'm extremely excited and pleased to have Fabien Saint-Gerard with us. He is a practitioner, spent his last 20 years in clinical drug development, starting in the front lines of clinical research as a clinical research associate, moved up the ranks into various leadership positions with a vast amount of experience in transformation in drug development. Today, he is a vice president with Novartis Global Drug Development Organization, one of the powerhouses and the most advanced drug development organizations in the world. We're very excited to have him here. Let's listen in to what he has to say in conversation with Martin Hodosi, one of our principals in Kearney's health practice.
Fabien, it's so great to have you here with us and to be able to meet again after these 2 years of COVID. Thank you for coming over and being with us.
Thank you. No, likewise, very happy to meet with you and discuss, some of these important themes, together with you today.
Wonderful. So there's been, a ton of excitement around digital, around the science in general over the last 10 years. We've seen, obviously established pharma companies really pushing hard to bring out new treatments. We've seen biotechs coming up. We've also seen, a lot of talk about and indeed movement on other entrants, such as the big technology players. A lot has happened and a lot has changed in the last 10 years. So thinking about this kind of conundrum of, a lot of good science, a lot of excitement, probably less ability to push that forward. What do you think, with your background in the industry and transformation, what are going to be kind of the key items that the industry now needs to push to keep momentum and maintain an accelerating productivity?
It's a very good question, Martin, and I very much share the view that you have in terms of that need to really radically look at, how do we create, new opportunities to fuel treatment options, moving forward. I think a good example would be, and that's across, many sort of industries as well, but even more prominent, I would say, in the pharma world these days, is the ability for organizations to truly understand the consequences of their choices as they play, various scenarios. So successful organizations we know today are the ones that are able to navigate those complexities, but really sort of understand what-if scenarios, to create, sort of transparency around the various trade-offs that they might have. And that could be, for cost, obviously, for productivity generation, but also in terms of, where do you deploy your capabilities and capacity moving forward. So the ability for organizations to simulate, the environment and with transparency understand the level of investments, short-term, mid-term, and long-term that will be required to deliver on their promise actually will be a true sort of differentiator, moving forward. And maybe one last piece as well is, as you have this understanding, your ability to basically pivot, your internal workforce, very quickly and then radically, reskilled it, and really apply it to new source of growth as well. So that last step is obviously very key, so that you are able to make the best of the opportunity with the wealth of knowledge that you have within the organization and pivot it to where it matters the most, ultimately for bringing drugs to our patients as quickly as possible.
Generally speaking, for a lot of these levers, the industry knows, what is possible, right? It's not about finding the next automation use case or understanding the opportunity of optimizing resources, but it's really about how to get it done, right? About executing on this. So how do you see from a structural or capability perspective, what is it that sets these successful organizations, development organizations apart?
I share very much your view. I think transformation is a constant, right? But the pace of transformation will even further accelerate moving forward. And I think it's very much of a challenge these days for organizations to really deliver on the short and mid-term goals and objectives, while at the same time you have to rethink yourself and future-proof your organization, moving forward, dealing or understanding, the future sort of uncertainties and the complexities that you'll have to deal with, right? How do you remain influential on the market, today, for your launches and the development programs that you have, while at the same time bringing a lot more customization in the approach as well, and then pivot, gradually without disrupting the business along those lines as well. So that's certainly a challenge. I think what is very interesting here is for organizations to provide or even reinforce, I would say, the individuals and the teams as the fundamental piece and core unit of organizations, and enabling those individuals and then teams to be the architect here too around designing the experience and the journey that they want to have as well moving forward. You could see actually the pandemic and the various sort of situations lately actually generating much more of a shift into network-based responses, much more organic compared to very much mechanistic, process-based approaches to how we deal with certain challenges. And I think here there's an opportunity for us to really enable those individuals and those teams actually to really architect their future. So there's maybe two levers I want to mention, or two avenues here, right? I think one is about the ability for organizations to create marketplaces where basically they can tap into the wealth of the knowledge and the passion as well that exists into the organization for ideation, for service offering, for matching opportunities in terms of roles, projects, with the profiles of the people, and really have a much more of an aligned and better match, from that perspective as well. So there are solutions that I think are important for organizations to bring in terms of using potentially the power of AI to better enhance, those match, especially in large-scale organization, cross-divisional. Sometimes it's quite complex actually to find, the right fit for the right type of work that we are having, and really bringing that personal development to the next level within an organization. You see a lot of attempts, from large organizations around, making the workplace a better place in terms of evolving, in terms of evolution. You see large, sort of reactions in terms of adjusting compensations or so. But I think fundamentally, it's really about, giving your ability to, design what you see is right for yourself, for your team, and then for delivering on your ambition. A second key lever and avenue, I think, is about how organizations are able to bring a level of confidence, a level of curiosity and know-how as to here to how do you want to leverage and exploit the data, the vast amount of data that exists into organizations, and to make the use of data something that is a lot more systematic, part of the day-to-day kind of activities, part of the day-to-day thinking, data-driven approaches, data-driven reflections. You start with the data and then you architect again, your response. Actually, we'll make quite a lot of different ways of generating, productivity as well in the downstream value chain, but really sort of across the entire value chain as well. So I think there's an opportunity here to mastering the data, making sure that you translate these data into actionable insights and really attach that to core processes and technology within organization. I think an important sort of trigger as to a level of adoption, of a solution that can have a massive impact into organization is the ability for organizations to truly attach those insights to a given processes and the technology, so that those three, triptychs actually are very much sort of attached with each other. And then the value in terms of here too again, faster development, faster submission, but really as a byproduct as well, generating productivity will be very much unlocked.
Yeah, super interesting. I think you spoke a lot about enabling the team, making sure that the tools are there. I think what we're getting at is almost like this mindset shift, right? Where we obviously need to enable people. We also need a certain pull from the employees. And how do you see that interacting with what you just spoke to in terms of providing them the tools?
Yeah, I see that the environment we're in actually, is very much, complex, very much intricate as well, right? So as leaders, we need to be able to develop the right skill and the right approaches actually, which will generate, very much adaptive responses, in the organizations, and that is not easy, right? I mean, there's a shift in terms of, the usual sort of approaches that we have in terms of dealing with the situation, and then create, much more organic, network-based, again, responses to the organization. So I think a prerequisite here, which is very important, especially as you empower your organization, you empower, teams and so on, is for organization across the levels to be able to bring, clarity as to what is the enterprise strategy, what is the direction that we're all, sort of aiming for the portfolio that we have. What are those areas, that we want to be the best at, and play into, and then that we want to lead as well. So from that perspective, actually, the more you create the ability to jointly articulate, the purpose that why you're here for and what you want to deliver, the outcome that are sort of expected and that we want to design together as well, the more you will, create that sort of appetite and augment, the energy within the organization to deliver on those promises. So I think there's maybe three levers here which maybe are worth mentioning. And that have proven, to work pretty well as well, is that number one, for leaders to truly augment or accelerate, I would say, the ability for decision making to be a lot more decentralized, or to basically be able to put the level of that decision making to the lowest level possible in the organization, to really accelerate speed and unlock speed in terms of putting, the organization and the governance to serve the team and not the reverse, really. I think a second aspect is that you have to, especially in this fluid environment, create the ability for teams to form and inform, very quickly and very rapidly, and really enable them to actually function in a community of practices, but practices that are truly created and organized to deliver the value to the primary stakeholders and end customers that we have. And the third one is really much upon the leaders as well, is how do we instill a bit more of an experimental mindset, especially in this fluid environment, and as we try new approaches, we need to give obviously a level of comfort, to teams and associates and individuals as a whole to try, fail, succeed, quickly, but to really be comfortable, with an environment which puts them at ease of trying and then testing, and then repeat, if we need to do so. So creating that psychological safe environment is obviously very much key, for people to be able to reach a next level of performance and a next level of impact as well. And maybe one last aspect, which I think is important here too as well, is how leaders as well, we feel comfortable, testing some of these new approaches as well, right? You need to be comfortable with your flows. You need to practice leadership. You need to test different approaches and see what kind of response you get, from these different approaches. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't really necessarily work, but then you adjust, accordingly. So as a leader as well, personally, for instance, it really helped me, practicing leadership to move away from, I'd say, content expertise into leading empowered teams, empowered experts, and truly unlock, innovation and the power of organizations as well for higher impact.
Yeah. Now I think, looking back this past 2 years, COVID has probably taught us a lot of things, but one of the things it certainly brings home is we need to think differently about leadership, right? And to your point around, a lot of the success, that I was speaking to in the beginning, the excitement that we saw in the industry, the rapid, approval of some of these vaccines and drugs and treatments that we're seeing now for COVID-19 would not have been possible in a very traditional, very hierarchical sort of model. Pushing things down, decentralizing was certainly key. The question, I guess, is what prerequisites do you need to make this successful? And I think you gave us a bit of an answer here that I just want to hold on to, which is making sure that accountability remains clear, and accountability that is set towards a certain purpose, which then again has to be clear for the organization.
I think it's very important, right? I mean, the need for clarity around which team, which individual actually, and the space for delivering on objectives, on developing a compound or so actually remains even more important, so that there is clarity as to what's kind of expected, but really enable those teams to clarify themselves this approach and give them the level of autonomy that they need for that. So I think accountability or empowerment is not contradictory to clarifying the accountability moving forward, but it becomes even more. I think what is important is the ability then from a profile standpoint and a capability standpoint to truly understand what are those profiles and individuals that will be able in such kind of environment to drive accountability where it needs to lie and make it effective, of course.
Wonderful. Fabien, you've given us a lot of great ideas here today. We've talked about value chain architecting. Mm-hmm. We talked about how to make and the impetus to make the individuals, the associates of the organization, these architects, and how leadership has to change to accommodate and nurture this new setup. Let's maybe now change pace a little bit. Let's take a step back. Mm-hmm. Let's think into the future. We fast forward 5 years. We're looking back at where we are here now. Between when we're having this interview and 2028. What do you think are going to be sort of the 2 to 3 key changes that we will see in the development model?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think there, when you think of how the pandemic, has released a lot of challenges, obviously, but a lot of options, as to how we want to redefine, drug development and so on moving forward. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and there's going to be a lot more sort of convergences, convergence in terms of domains, and we can speak about that, but also convergence in terms of, acknowledging, how the biotechs, for instance, have been able to truly pivot, and address some of these situations we had with the pandemic over the past, months and years now, and really being able to provide actually something which was very much unprecedented, like treatment options to a very vast, large size of our population, while at the same time, I think, definitely much leveraging the core capabilities from the large pharmas as well, right? So you could see strong partners, across the industry to really collaborate and help each other as to having a global response to a global, pandemic and situation. So I think, fast forward 5 years, right? I mean, there's going to be, from my perspective, a lot of convergence between biotech worlds and obviously the pharmas as well, but also in terms of domains, how technology will inform biology or science, as a whole, and how it will help us to be a lot more deterministic even in the drug discovery process and the drug development process as a whole, right? So I think ones will have to be very much embracing those convergences and leveraging them rather than trying to recreate every single capability, within your own sort of organization, but really, leverage that ecosystem in a broad sense of it. So if I were to maybe be specific in terms of bringing 3 key levers here or characteristics of a winning model in the future. I think one, and we've touched base on that, is the significant decentralization of the power within the industry, and then really having a much more venture capitalistic approach to drug development. The second one, which I think resonates a lot here, is for organization, regardless of their size, but to truly create a unique ability to leverage what I would call their utility players, their utility leaders, in terms of having them move from one priority at the enterprise level to another priority at the enterprise level as well. And then having them sitting on maybe fewer, but highly skilled and focused core competencies and capabilities, within the organization as well, which might obviously enabling their ability to deal with the priorities. And the third element as well is the ability for organizations to successfully set up and then manage, very integrated, collaborations with a much larger spectrum of partners, there, and really, like we were talking about, really embrace, extreme relationship-based model as well. So these would be the 3 predictions which I'm happy to, check in a couple of years' time together with you.
Excellent, Fabien. We'll meet again in 5 years. We'll see if we can cross those all off the list. Thank you, Fabien, for coming. It's been great to talk today.
It's been a pleasure to share, some of the thoughts and continuing the journey with you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.